We did it, Desmond! Take that!
Calm down, Sterling.
Admit it, you were worried.
I knew you'd pull through.
Excuse me, I'd like to see the G600, please. The entire showroom fell silent. Sterling Hale, the highest performing salesman at Aerocrest Aviation, slowly looked the visitor up and down. Mud-covered work boots, a faded jacket, rough, calloused hands. Sterling made no attempt to hide his disgust. "You smell like a barn," he said, "and you're tracking dirt all over my floor." He stepped closer, raising his voice. "The G600 costs around $65 million. You couldn't even afford the fuel required to look at it." Then he spoke even louder, making sure every customer, employee, and security camera in the building captured his words. "Get out before I have to call someone to clean up after you." A woman wearing pearls covered her mouth as she laughed. Two men standing beside the espresso bar pulled out their phones and began recording. No one defended the man. No one told Sterling to stop. But what Sterling Hale did not know, what no one inside that luxurious showroom could possibly have imagined, was that before everything was over, he would be the one desperately begging to be heard. To understand what happened inside Aerocrest Aviation, you first need to understand where Desmond Brooks came from. Not the version Sterling saw. Not merely the muddy boots, worn jacket, and weathered hands. The real Desmond Brooks. His story began in darkness, long before sunlight reached the horizon. Every morning, Desmond woke before dawn. He did not need an alarm. The land itself seemed to call him awake. His bedroom window faced east, overlooking 4,500 acres of farmland in East Texas. Red clay soil stretched toward the distant tree line. Pecan groves stood in orderly rows like disciplined soldiers. Soybean fields rolled beneath the wind, moving like green waves beneath a soft pink sky. Desmond would sit quietly on the edge of his bed before beginning the day. His boots were always waiting near the door. They were the same pair of Red Wings he had worn for years. The leather was cracked, and mud had sunk so deeply into the stitching that it would never completely wash away. Desmond did not care. Those boots had carried him across every inch of his property. They had earned every stain. Before sunrise, he stepped outside. The air smelled of damp soil and diesel fuel. A barn cat leaped from the porch railing as the screen door closed behind him. Desmond crossed the yard toward his truck, a dust-covered Ford F-250 that had served him for many years. A dent remained in the rear fender from the day he had backed into a fence post during a rainstorm. He turned the key. The engine coughed before rumbling to life. The AM radio crackled with a weather report from Marshall. The forecast promised scattered clouds and intense heat. It would be a good day for working the fields. But Desmond was not heading into the fields that morning. He first drove past the central irrigation system, an enormous network of steel pipes, sensors, and automated equipment humming softly in the dim light. Most people passing the farm would have seen only wires and machinery. Desmond saw 18 patents. He had designed the entire system himself. The network used soil sensors and automated water distribution to reduce water waste by 40%. It had begun as a rough idea drawn on a napkin at his kitchen table. Now, agricultural operations in 14 states paid to use the technology. Brooks Agricultural Systems. That was the name printed on every patent. It was not stylish or designed to impress investors. It was simply his last name, followed by an honest description of what he did. The licensing revenue alone generated more money in a single quarter than most families would see in an entire lifetime. When the value of his land, crops, mineral rights, and company were combined, Desmond Brooks was worth more than $400 million. Yet no one would have guessed it by looking at him. He did not own an expensive suit. He did not wear a watch. His truck did not have leather seats. He ate breakfast at the same diner in Marshall every Saturday. He ordered scrambled eggs, black coffee, and 2 pieces of toast. The waitress called him Mr. Brooks and had never asked what he did for a living. That was who Desmond was. His wealth had been built in the dirt, and he saw no reason to wash that dirt away, simply to impress someone else. That day, however, he had business beyond the farm. For months, Desmond had been studying the Gulfstream G600. He did not want a private jet as a symbol of luxury. He needed it for logistics. His operations now extended through Texas, Georgia, and the Carolinas. He attended quarterly meetings with licensing partners across several time zones. Commercial travel meant delays, connections, and countless hours spent inside airports when he could have been inspecting his own land. The G600 made practical sense. The fully configured aircraft would cost approximately $65 million. Desmond had reviewed the numbers carefully. He had discussed the purchase with his chief financial officer, Marissa Lane. The money was available. All he needed to do was enter the dealership and begin the transaction. That was exactly what he intended to do. He drove north toward Dallas without an appointment, entourage, or briefcase filled with financial documents. He was simply a man driving an old work truck, with mud still clinging to his boots, preparing to purchase an airplane as calmly as most people purchase groceries. Aerocrest Aviation stood beside a regional executive airport. The building was constructed from glass and steel, with cathedral-like ceilings visible from the parking area. Through the enormous front windows, Desmond could see a polished Cessna Citation slowly rotating on a display platform. An espresso bar occupied one side of the showroom. Men in perfectly fitted suits shook hands beside polished desks. Desmond parked his Ford between a black Mercedes and a white Porsche Cayenne. His truck looked as though it had taken a wrong turn from another world. He stepped out, stretched his back, and looked up at the Aerocrest sign. He did not examine his reflection. He did not wipe his boots. He did not hesitate. He walked directly through the front doors. The moment he entered, the atmosphere changed. It was not sudden or dramatic. It was the subtle shift that occurs when someone enters a room and does not match the furniture. Bodies became slightly tense. Glances lingered a moment too long. Conversations became just quiet enough for the change to be noticed. Desmond noticed. He always did. The showroom smelled of polished leather and sandalwood from an expensive diffuser near the reception desk. Soft jazz flowed through hidden speakers, carefully chosen to make the room feel wealthy without appearing desperate to prove it. The floor was made of cream-colored Italian marble with delicate gray veins. Desmond's boots left faint prints of red clay with every step. Small pieces of East Texas marked a floor designed to remain perfectly untouched. He approached the reception desk. A young blonde woman sat behind it, her hair pulled tightly back, a headset resting over one ear, and her nails recently polished. She looked up. A professional smile appeared on her face, then flickered like a failing light. "May I help you, sir?" Her gaze dropped toward his boots before quickly returning to his face. Then she glanced over her shoulder toward the sales floor, silently searching for guidance. That was when Sterling Hale appeared. Sterling moved through the showroom like a shark moving through shallow water, smooth, confident, and constantly aware of where the money was. He was in his 40s, with dark hair combed neatly backward and a charcoal suit fitted so perfectly that it looked sewn directly onto his body. A silver watch reflected the overhead lights whenever he moved his hand. Sterling had been Aerocrest's most successful salesman for several consecutive years. His greatest talent was not charm, it was profiling. Within moments of a customer entering the building, Sterling believed he could estimate that person's net worth. He studied shoes, watches, clothing, posture, and the vehicle parked outside. The calculation had become automatic. He had already calculated Desmond's value, or so he believed. "Hello there, buddy," Sterling said warmly. His voice was too friendly, the kind of false warmth accompanied by a hand on someone's shoulder while steering that person toward the exit. "Are you looking for someone?" Desmond met his eyes. "No, I'm interested in the G600. Sterling's smile remained in place, but something behind it shifted. Amusement. It was the expression an adult might give a child who announced he planned to become an astronaut. "The G600? Sterling repeated slowly. "You do know what the G600 is, correct?" "A Gulfstream," Desmond replied. "Long-range aircraft, accommodates as many as 19 passengers, range of approximately 6,600 nautical miles. I've studied it carefully." For a moment, Sterling's jaw tightened. Then the smile returned, wider than before. He turned slightly toward the showroom, making sure the other clients, the people at the espresso bar, and the junior sales representatives could see him. Then Sterling laughed. It was not a polite chuckle. It was a loud, genuine laugh. He tilted his head backward, his shoulders shaking as one hand struck the reception desk hard enough to rattle the pen holder. "Everett!" Sterling shouted toward the floor manager. "You need to hear this. This gentleman wants the G600. Everett Sloan looked up from his tablet. He was an older man with gray hair at his temples and reading glasses resting low on his nose. He raised his eyebrows but said nothing. That silence was a form of permission. Sterling turned back toward Desmond, still grinning. He moved close enough for Desmond to smell his sharp, expensive cologne. Then he lowered his voice into a theatrical whisper that could be heard by everyone nearby. Listen, my friend, the G600 starts at more than $60 million. He raised his fingers as though explaining basic mathematics to a child. Are you certain you didn't mean a Volkswagen Golf? Laughter moved through the showroom. A woman wearing a cream blazer pressed her lips together, attempting to conceal her smile. Two men beside the espresso machine exchanged a look of disbelief. Desmond did not laugh. He did not flinch. He did not look away. I mean the G600, he said quietly. Sterling's smile weakened slightly. He straightened his posture and adjusted his cuffs. Then he made a decision that seemed insignificant at the moment, but would alter the direction of his life. He decided to make Desmond wait until he became embarrassed enough to leave. Let me collect some information, Sterling said in a falsely reassuring tone. I'll return shortly. He did not collect anything. Instead, Sterling walked past Desmond without another glance and crossed the sales floor to greet a white man in a navy polo shirt who had entered after Desmond. The man received a full handshake, a warm introduction, and Sterling's immediate attention. Desmond remained standing alone. Minutes passed. The receptionist avoided looking at him. Her computer screen suddenly seemed fascinating. Desmond studied the miniature aircraft displayed behind glass along the far wall. He could identify every model without reading the labels. More time passed. A member of the cleaning staff appeared near Desmond's boots with a mop. The employee began wiping away the mud prints in an exaggerated display. It was not openly hostile, but the message was unmistakable. From across the showroom, Cameron Reed watched everything. Cameron was a young junior salesman who had only recently joined AeroCrest. He sat behind his desk with both hands pressed flat against the surface, his fingers tense. The entire situation made his stomach twist. He stood and took a step toward Desmond. "Sit down, rookie." Sterling's voice came from behind him. It was quiet and firm, carrying the threat of a man who did not need to shout. "I'm handling this one." Sterling smiled, but there was no kindness in his eyes. Cameron slowly returned to his chair. He continued watching. After a deliberate period of neglect, Sterling finally approached Desmond again. "You're still here?" he asked with false surprise. Then he tilted his head. "All right, what do you do for a living? Help me understand what we're dealing with." "Farming," Desmond replied. Sterling slowly nodded. His lips pressed together as amusement spread across his face once more. "Farming," he repeated as though repeating a badly delivered joke. "Right, of course." Sterling placed a hand on Desmond's shoulder. The gesture appeared friendly, but it was intended to steer him away. He began guiding Desmond toward the opposite end of the showroom, away from information about the G600 and toward the turboprop section. The aircraft there were smaller and cost only a fraction of the Gulfstream. It was where Sterling directed customers he did not consider worthy of his attention. "Let me show you something closer to your level," Sterling said. "We have several excellent King Airs. They're practical for shorter trips and would probably suit a farming operation." Desmond stopped walking. Sterling's hand slipped from his shoulder. "I did not come here to see a King Air," Desmond said. His voice remained level and controlled, the voice of a man who had spent his life choosing every word carefully. "I came to discuss the G600. I would like to review the specifications, consider the available configurations, and discuss delivery." The amusement disappeared from Sterling's face. In its place came irritation. Desmond was not following the script Sterling had written for him. He was supposed to feel ashamed. He was supposed to leave. Sterling crossed his arms. "Before I show you anything related to the G600, I'm going to need proof of funds. A bank statement, asset verification, or a letter from your financial advisor." Desmond's expression did not change. "Do you require proof of funds from every customer before allowing them to view information about an aircraft?" "It is company policy," Sterling said flatly. It was not company policy. Cameron knew that. He had watched Sterling provide specifications to countless walk-in clients without requesting a single financial document. As long as those clients dressed a certain way, drove the right vehicle, and had the skin color Sterling expected. Desmond held Sterling's gaze. "I would like to speak with your manager." Sterling dismissed the request with a careless wave, as though swatting away an insect. "I am the person you speak to here. Everett supports my decision." He nodded toward the floor manager. Everett remained across the room, holding his tablet. Without looking directly at Desmond, he gave a slow nod. A wall had been placed in front of him. Polite on the surface, solid brick underneath. Desmond stood in the middle of a showroom filled with $60 million aircraft. He possessed enough wealth to purchase several of them outright. Yet no one inside the building was willing to treat him as a legitimate customer. The mud on his boots had begun to dry and break into tiny pieces across the marble floor. Sterling looked down at it. "I believe we both understand that this is not really the place for what?" Desmond asked softly. Sterling did not complete the sentence. He did not need to. Everyone in the showroom understood exactly what he meant. But Sterling was not finished. Men like Sterling did not simply turn people away. They wanted those people to understand that they had never been welcome. Closing the door was not enough. They wanted the unwanted person to hear the lock turn behind them. Sterling moved closer. The sharp scent of his cologne mixed with the lingering smell of earth and diesel on Desmond's jacket. Two completely different worlds occupied the same few feet of space. "I'm going to be honest with you," Sterling said. The false friendliness had vanished. His voice was colder now, deliberate. "I have been selling private aircraft for more than a decade. I know real buyers. I can identify them the moment they walk through that door." He paused, allowing the silence to work for him. "And you, my friend, do not smell like a buyer." He leaned closer. His voice barely rose above a whisper, but the room was quiet enough for every word to carry. "You smell like soil and diesel. You smell like you've been standing in a field since before sunrise." His eyes slowly traveled toward Desmond's boots before returning to his face. He conducted the inspection openly, allowing everyone to watch. "This floor costs more per square foot than most farms earn in a month," Sterling continued, "and you're dragging mud across it as though you own the building." Desmond said nothing. His hands remained still at his sides. He looked like a farmer watching a storm approach from a distance, already knowing exactly when it would arrive. Sterling straightened his tie. Then he did something he had never done during his career at Aerocrest. He pulled a chair from the reception area and placed it directly in front of Desmond. He did not offer the chair to him. Sterling sat in it himself, crossing one leg over the other and leaning back comfortably. He had turned himself into a human barricade between a black farmer and a $65 million airplane. "Here is what I believe happened," Sterling said with the patient tone of a professor explaining a simple lesson to a slow student. "You were driving past this building on your way to purchase animal feed. You saw the airplanes through the window and thought it might be entertaining to come inside and pretend for a while." His smile became thin and sharp. "You wanted to play dress-up in a world that does not belong to you." Sterling leaned back farther. "That is understandable. Everyone has dreams, but dreams do not purchase Gulf Streams. Bank accounts do. And I suspect your bank account contains about as many zeros as your property contains clean boots." The woman wearing the cream blazer had stopped laughing. She watched openly now, her expression caught between discomfort and fascination, like someone witnessing an accident but refusing to look away. The men at the espresso bar still held their phones. One of them had begun recording a video. The other tilted his screen toward his companion and whispered something that caused them both to smirk. No one lowered the phones. No one said Sterling had gone far enough. The showroom had become an audience, and Sterling was performing for them. Everett stood nearby with his arms crossed. His expression remained carefully neutral, the face of a manager who had convinced himself that doing nothing meant he was not involved. He knew better. Desmond looked at Sterling sitting in the chair. Then he examined the showroom filled with people watching his humiliation as though it were entertainment. Some appeared amused. Others deliberately looked away. Not one person had chosen to stand beside him. Desmond finally spoke. Each word was placed carefully, like a stone being set into the ground. "I drove a considerable distance to come here. I arrived prepared to spend $65 million. I memorized the specifications, and the money is available. All I needed from you was a piece of paper and a professional conversation." Sterling uncrossed his legs and leaned forward. Then he delivered the sentence that would eventually be repeated by news networks throughout Texas. "Here's an idea," he said, raising his voice so the entire showroom could hear. "Why don't you return when you have something besides mud on your boots and a dream in your pocket?" Sterling rose, straightened his jacket, and turned toward the room with a grin, almost expecting applause. Several customers laughed. The laughter came in short, uncomfortable bursts, the kind produced by people who felt ashamed, but not ashamed enough to stop participating. A man near the window slowly clapped twice. The man recording beside the espresso bar gave Sterling a thumbs up. Sterling noticed and winked at him. The showroom had become his stage. Every person inside it had chosen a side. Some joined the laughter. Others stared at the floor and remained silent. Both choices left Desmond standing alone. Cameron sat behind his desk with his jaw clenched so tightly that his teeth hurt. His hands trembled, not because he was afraid, but because he felt he had witnessed a boundary being crossed that could never be repaired. He wanted to stand. He wanted to speak. But Sterling's earlier command echoed inside his head. "Sit down, rookie." The chair beneath him felt as heavy as concrete. Desmond Brooks remained in the center of the showroom, mud drying on his boots. Soft jazz continued playing through the speakers. The air remained filled with the scents of espresso, cologne, and polished marble. But the elegant room had transformed into something uglier than anyone inside it wanted to admit. Desmond reached into his jacket pocket. Sterling's eyes followed the movement. For a brief instant, uncertainty appeared on his face. It was not quite fear. It was the sudden realization that he knew absolutely nothing about the man standing before him. Desmond removed his phone. He did not reveal that it had been recording since the moment he entered the building. That would come later. Instead, he made a call. The showroom continued buzzing after Sterling's performance. Some customers returned to their conversations as though the entertainment had ended. The man who had been recording stopped the video, apparently satisfied that he had captured enough material to share with friends. Sterling returned to his desk. He leaned back in his chair, placed his hands behind his head, and smiled with the satisfaction of a man who believed he had won. The call connected. "Marissa," Desmond said calmly. His tone remained level and unhurried, as though he were ordering coffee on a quiet morning. "I'm at AeroCrest Aviation. I'd like to proceed with the G600 purchase we discussed. Please initiate the wire transfer for the full amount." He listened briefly. "Yes, the $65 million configuration." Another pause. "Thank you, Marissa." Desmond ended the call and returned the phone to his pocket. Sterling had heard enough of the conversation to understand what Desmond was claiming. He turned his head slightly. His grin remained, but one corner had begun to bend awkwardly, like a picture frame knocked out of position. $65 million, Sterling called from his desk. He shook his head and laughed, but the sound was thinner now. "You're very convincing. You should consider acting. Hollywood might have a place for you." Two nearby salesmen laughed, but their response was quieter than before. Something inside the room had shifted. It was only a small change, like the trembling of a compass needle before it suddenly turns. Desmond did not answer. He remained in the same place, with the same posture and unreadable expression. Cameron studied Desmond's face. There was something in his eyes that Cameron could not immediately identify. It was not anger. It was not humiliation. It was not surrender. Then Cameron understood. It was patience. The kind of patience possessed by someone who already knows exactly what will happen next. A short while later, the receptionist's computer chimed. It was an ordinary notification sound, the kind heard countless times every day. But when the receptionist opened the message, she stopped breathing. Her lips parted. One hand moved toward her mouth. She read the email repeatedly, her eyes widening each time. Then she turned toward the floor manager. "Mr. Sloan," she said, her voice tight and unsteady. "You need to see this immediately." Everett approached casually, expecting a scheduling problem or another routine invoice. He leaned over her shoulder, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the monitor. The color slowly disappeared from his face. Displayed on the screen was an email from Marissa Lane, Chief Financial Officer of Brooks Agricultural Systems. It contained a formal letter of intent to purchase a fully configured Gulfstream G600. Attached to the message was a wire transfer authorization from First National Bank of Texas. The amount was $65 million. Beneath it appeared a second figure. The remaining balance in Desmond's account after the purchase would be completed, $383 million. Everett gripped the edge of the desk. His knuckles turned white. "Sterling." His voice had changed. The careful neutrality was gone. In its place was something raw and frightened. "Sterling, come here." Sterling looked up from his desk, initially irritated by Everett's tone. He pushed back his chair, adjusted his tie, and approached with the slow confidence of a man who believed the world contained nothing capable of surprising him. Everett turned the monitor toward him. Sterling looked at the screen. His smile did not gradually disappear. It collapsed. It fell apart like a building losing its foundation, one floor at a time and then all at once. The muscles in his face went slack. His mouth opened slightly. His eyes moved across the numbers, then returned to the beginning and read them again, as though another reading might change their meaning. $65 million authorized and ready for transfer. Remaining account balance, $383 million. Sterling lifted one trembling hand toward his mouth. The silver watch he had worn like a symbol of success suddenly looked like a cheap toy. He slowly turned toward Desmond. Desmond had not moved. He stood in the same place, wearing the same faded jacket and muddy boots. But now everyone in the showroom understood that something had changed. The conversations beside the espresso bar stopped. The man who had previously recorded Desmond lowered his phone. The woman in the cream blazer froze with her cup halfway toward her lips. Everett typed Desmond's name into a search engine. The results appeared almost immediately. Desmond Brooks, founder and sole owner of Brooks Agricultural Systems, holder of 18 patents related to irrigation technology and soil sensor networks, licensing agreements active in 14 states, featured in Forbes, Bloomberg, and Agricultural Innovation Monthly. Estimated net worth, more than $400 million. Everett swallowed hard. Then he crossed the showroom toward Desmond. Each step seemed heavier than the one before it. When he arrived, his voice sounded thin and stripped of authority. It was the voice of the man who had realized he was standing on the wrong side of history. Mr. Brooks. Everett paused. Mr. Brooks, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. Could we please begin again? Desmond studied him for a long moment. Then he looked past Everett toward Sterling, who stood beside the reception desk with a face as pale as the marble beneath his polished shoes. Desmond looked at the salesman who had laughed at him. He looked at the customers who had recorded his humiliation. He looked at the entire room that had watched the cruelty unfold without doing anything to stop it. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. It was not the silence of anger. It was something worse. It was the silence of disappointment, the voice of someone who had hoped just once that the world might behave differently. I came here to purchase an airplane, Desmond said. I drove here with the money prepared and the specifications memorized. All I needed was for someone to treat me like a customer. He paused. The showroom became so quiet that the air conditioning system sounded like thunder. Instead, I was laughed at. I was ignored, insulted, physically blocked, and told that I smelled like a barn. I was told to return when I had something besides mud on my boots. His gaze found Sterling. Sterling could not hold it. He looked toward the floor and stared at the dried mud prints he had mocked. You did not only laugh at me, Sterling, Desmond said. You laughed at every person who has entered this building without looking the way you believe a wealthy person should look. Desmond reached into his pocket. Sterling flinched involuntarily. Desmond removed only his truck keys. I will not purchase an aircraft from Aerocrest Aviation, he said. Not now. Not ever. He turned and walked toward the exit. Each step left one final faint print on the marble floor. No one spoke. No one moved. No one laughed. The glass door closed behind him. Then the showroom erupted. Everett spun toward Sterling and pointed at him. His hand shook violently. His face turned dark red as he realized that the dealership had just lost a $65 million transaction. My office, now. Sterling did not move at first. He remained beside the reception desk, staring at the closed entrance as though Desmond might return and reveal that everything had been a joke. But the door stayed shut. The mud prints remained on the floor. Sterling, now. The office door slammed with enough force to rattle the framed sales awards hanging on the wall. Through the glass partition, every employee could see Everett pacing behind his desk and gesturing wildly. Sterling sat across from him with hunched shoulders and both hands raised defensively. The words were muffled, but Everett's frantic tone carried through the glass. He was calculating the dealership's losses in real time. The lost sale was only the beginning. There would be damage to the company's reputation, possible legal consequences, and corporate scrutiny. Sterling's excuses emerged in incomplete fragments. How was I supposed to know? He looked like... People don't enter this showroom dressed that way. I was only doing my job. Each excuse was weaker than the one before it. Every defense collapsed before he could finish speaking because there was no version of the story in which telling a customer that he smelled like a barn and belonged at a tractor dealership could be considered professional behavior. Sterling knew it. Everett knew it. Everyone on the sales floor knew it. While the two men shouted behind the closed office door, Cameron quietly opened his laptop. He created a new document and began writing a formal complaint to Aerocrest Aviation's corporate parent company. He documented everything he had witnessed. Sterling's laughter, the chair used as a physical barricade, the demand for proof of funds despite the absence of any such official policy, the deliberate period during which Desmond had been ignored, the remark about mud on his boots and a dream in his pocket, the clients who had recorded the humiliation, the manager who had watched and done nothing. Cameron carefully reviewed the complaint, attached his employee identification, and sent it. Then he closed the laptop and stared at the remaining mud prints on the floor. Meanwhile, Desmond was already driving away in his truck. He did not speed. He did not strike the steering wheel. He did not call anyone merely to release his anger. He drove exactly as he had arrived, calmly and without hurry, with the AM radio playing softly. But his mind was working. Desmond had experienced disrespect before. It was not unfamiliar. He was a black man with dirt on his hands who regularly entered rooms designed for white men in spotless suits. He had felt the atmosphere grow colder inside banks, car dealerships, and restaurants where hosts looked past him to welcome the white couple standing behind him. Most of the time, he had allowed the insult to pass. His life was too full and his land too vast to carry every act of prejudice with him. But what happened at Arrowcrest was different. Sterling had not merely behaved rudely. He had transformed Desmond's humiliation into a public performance. He had made a paying customer into a joke for an audience. That demanded a different response. Desmond picked up his phone and called a television producer whose contact information he had saved after meeting her at a business conference. Nadia Grant was an investigative journalist in Dallas who specialized in consumer protection stories. She answered the call. Desmond told her everything in a calm, factual manner, as though explaining a malfunctioning soil sensor. He described what had happened. He explained what he had witnessed. Then he told her what evidence he possessed. His phone had recorded every word Sterling said. He had prepared a written timeline of the encounter. Arrowcrest's own security cameras had captured the incident from multiple angles. Nadia asked him one question. "Mr. Brooks, would you be willing to speak on camera?" Desmond looked through the windshield at the red clay fields passing beside him. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "I believe I would." Soon afterward, Arrowcrest's corporate office contacted Desmond directly. The executive on the phone spoke in a polished and carefully rehearsed crisis management tone. The company offered a private apology, a substantial discount, VIP treatment, and a dedicated sales representative. They offered nearly everything except delivering the G600 directly to his front porch. Desmond listened to the entire offer. Then he answered, "No, thank you." He ended the call. Sterling was suspended while the company conducted an internal review. Arrowcrest still believed it could contain the incident quietly. The company was wrong. Nadia Grant's investigative report aired on a Dallas television station. Across the screen appeared a title in bold white letters against a black background. "Turned away in muddy boots. How a Texas billionaire farmer was laughed out of a luxury jet dealership." The report began with Desmond's audio recording. Sterling's voice filled homes throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth region. Every insult was preserved with perfect clarity. The remark about the tractor dealership, the comment about smelling like a barn, the mockery over the cost of the airplane, and the line that became the center of every headline that followed. "Why don't you return when you have something besides mud on your boots and a dream in your pocket?" Then came the laughter. The sound of an entire showroom laughing at a man they had decided was worthless because of his skin color, clothing, and shoes. Nadia allowed the audio to continue without interruption. There were no graphics or explanations, only Sterling's voice and the laughter of the people around him. The anchors remained silent as viewers listened. Then Nadia described the entire sequence of events, the deliberate waiting, the demand for proof of funds that was not imposed on white customers, the chair placed in Desmond's path, the floor manager who watched and silently approved the behavior. Nadia interviewed 3 other black professionals, a surgeon, a technology executive, and a real estate developer. Each person described being profiled inside luxury businesses. The cities and stores were different. The pattern was the same assumptions, the same condescending tone, the same judgment in the salesperson's eyes. Arrowcrest Aviation was given an opportunity to respond on camera. The company declined. Nadia informed the viewers of that decision with a single raised eyebrow that expressed more than an entire statement could have. The report spread rapidly. Millions of people watched it online. National networks soon repeated the story. Cable news channels replayed the recording. Social media exploded. The hashtag Muddy Boots Billionaire began trending across the country. Sterling's remarks were quoted, remixed, captured in screenshots, and included in reaction videos seen by tens of millions of people. But the sound that spread farthest was Sterling's laugh, the loud, shoulder-shaking laugh he had released when Desmond first requested information about the G600. It was isolated from the rest of the recording and shared with captions such as, "This is what prejudice sounds like," and "He laughed at a man worth more than $400 million. Sterling Hale's face appeared on screens across America. Not one portrayal was sympathetic. Desmond's legal team filed a civil rights lawsuit in federal court. The defendants were Aerocrest Aviation and Sterling Hale individually. The lawsuit alleged racial discrimination in a place of public accommodation in violation of federal and Texas civil rights law. The discovery process exposed Aerocrest's internal operations. Company sales records revealed a pattern so consistent that it appeared almost intentional. During the previous several years, Black and Latino customers were directed toward lower-priced aircraft far more frequently than white clients. They were asked for proof of funds before receiving aircraft specifications at a dramatically higher rate. Black walk-in clients received only a fraction of the attention given to white walk-in clients. The figures were devastating. They were not shocking because no one had imagined discrimination existed. They were shocking because the discrimination had been documented with such precision. Aerocrest had profiled customers with the efficiency of an assembly line. The company's own records proved it. Cameron Reed's written complaint became part of the evidence. His statement confirmed every part of Desmond's experience and provided details that only an employee could explain. He described the unwritten rules of the sales floor, Sterling's profiling system, and the silent approval from management that allowed it to continue. Cameron later testified during a deposition. His voice remained steady, although his hands trembled. When an attorney asked why he had filed the complaint, Cameron answered honestly, "Because I watched it happen. When you watch something like that and say nothing, you become part of it." Sterling was officially terminated from Aerocrest shortly after the lawsuit was filed. He attempted to pursue a wrongful termination claim. His attorney listened to the recording, viewed the security footage, examined the internal sales data, and advised Sterling to abandon the case. Sterling followed that advice. The lawsuit did not proceed to a full trial. Aerocrest's attorneys reviewed the evidence, calculated the company's potential liability, and entered settlement negotiations. The terms were later announced in a courtroom presided over by Judge Celeste Rowan. Aerocrest Aviation agreed to pay $2,800,000 in damages. The company was also required to completely rebuild its sales training program, introduce enforceable anti-discrimination policies, and undergo independent third-party audits for several years. Sterling was ordered to complete 200 hours of community service with civil rights organizations. His secondary real estate license was referred to the Texas State Licensing Board for review. His name would remain permanently connected to the public court record, searchable by anyone who investigated the man who had laughed at a farmer wearing muddy boots. Judge Rowan delivered a brief statement before ending the proceedings. She explained that the case did not represent a single isolated incident. It revealed a systemic failure created by individuals who acted with prejudice and institutions that rewarded silence. The courtroom was crowded. Nadia sat in the second row with an open notebook. Cameras recorded the proceedings from the gallery. Desmond sat at the plaintiff's table wearing a navy suit. For many people watching, it was the first time they had seen him dressed formally. His attorney sat beside him, reviewing documents. Beneath the table, away from the cameras but visible to anyone who looked carefully, Desmond wore his Red Wing boots. They were clean that day, but they were the same boots. He had never replaced them. When the settlement was announced, Desmond did not smile. He did not raise his fist. He did not turn toward the cameras. He simply nodded once. It was the quiet acknowledgement of a man who had asked for accountability and received it. Outside the courtroom, Desmond gave one brief public statement. "This money cannot erase what happened," he said, "but it can help build something better." He donated the entire $2,800,000 settlement to a scholarship fund supporting young Black entrepreneurs in East Texas. Every dollar went into the fund. It was named in honor of his grandmother, who had worked the same farmland generations before him. Later, Desmond finally purchased his Gulfstream G600. He did not purchase it from Aerocrest Aviation. He never communicated with the company again. He bought the aircraft through Horizon Wing Partners, a black-owned aviation brokerage in Atlanta. The small company employed only 3 people and was operated by a woman named Patrice Monroe, who had originally launched the business from her kitchen table. Desmond entered Patrice's office wearing the same Carhartt jacket and the same Red Wing boots, with fresh mud from his early walk through the pecan groves. His Ford F-250 was parked outside. Patrice met him at the door with a handshake and a cup of coffee. There was no profiling, no suspicion, no jokes whispered behind a reception desk. There was simply a businesswoman running her company and a customer ready to complete a transaction. The entire purchase was completed quickly and professionally. When the G600 was delivered to a private hangar near Marshall, Desmond stood on the tarmac and watched the aircraft roll to a stop. Its white fuselage gleamed beneath the Texas sun. The engines clicked softly as they cooled, the smell of jet fuel mixed with red clay dust blowing from the fields. Desmond climbed aboard and sat in the pilot's seat. Through the cockpit window, he looked toward the flat Texas horizon, the same horizon he had watched from his bedroom throughout his life. Beneath the seat, his boots left a faint mark of mud on the carpet. He did not wipe it away. In Dallas, the consequences continued spreading. Aerocrest completed its first required independent audit. Employees underwent new anti-discrimination training. The so-called proof of funds policy that Sterling had claimed was standard procedure was formally removed from every Aerocrest location nationwide. The company released a public statement acknowledging systemic failures in the treatment of customers. It sounded as though attorneys had written every word. They probably had. Other luxury aviation dealerships noticed what had happened. Several competing companies began internal investigations before anyone required them to do so. An aviation industry association issued new guidelines for fair and equitable treatment of clients, directly referencing the Aerocrest case. Desmond was later invited to deliver the keynote address at the National Business Aviation Association's annual conference in Las Vegas. The ballroom was filled with hundreds of executives, manufacturers, brokers, and pilots. It smelled exactly like the Aerocrest showroom: leather, ambition, and expensive cologne. Desmond approached the podium wearing his Red Wing boots. He did not wear a suit. He wore jeans and his Carhartt jacket. Mud from his morning walk through a soybean field remained visible on the soles. He spoke quietly. He used no slides or written notes. He simply told a room filled with powerful people what it felt like to be publicly mocked for attempting to spend his own money. When he finished, the entire audience stood. The applause lasted longer than the speech itself. Cameron no longer worked for Aerocrest either. A competing dealership had followed the case and recognized the courage behind his decision. The company recruited him specifically because of his integrity. He earned the fastest promotion in the organization's history and became a senior sales associate. On his first day, his new manager told him, "You chose to do the right thing when doing it could cost you something. That is the only kind of right that truly matters." As for Sterling Hale, the luxury sales industry wanted nothing to do with him. His name became a warning repeated in training programs and mentioned in human resources manuals. Eventually, he accepted a commission-based position at a used car dealership outside Fort Worth. He worked from a fluorescent-lit office with coffee-stained carpet and the smell of old rubber. During the legal proceedings, Sterling had been offered an opportunity to make a public apology. His attorney advised him to accept it. The judge encouraged him. Even Everett, desperate to separate himself from the scandal, urged Sterling to apologize. Sterling refused. That refusal followed him everywhere. It appeared in every employment interview, background check, and internet search connected to his name. He became known as the man who laughed at a farmer wearing muddy boots and never once admitted that he was wrong. If this story reaches something real inside you, press the like button so more people can hear it. Subscribe for more stories in which justice does not merely whisper, it arrives carrying evidence. And remember this, the next time someone walks through a doorway looking as though they do not belong, think carefully before judging them. The person you dismiss may be the one who owns the entire field. Never judge someone entirely by appearance. The man in the muddy boots possessed more wealth than everyone in that showroom combined. The most powerful people often feel no need to prove themselves to anyone. Before laughing at someone else, examine your own assumptions first. Never judge someone entirely by appearance. The man in the muddy boots possessed more wealth than everyone in that showroom combined. The most powerful people often feel no need to prove themselves to anyone. Before laughing at someone else, examine your own assumptions first.